Hello, travelers of time. Welcome back to another journey through history's shadows. Before we begin tonight's story, I'd love to know, where are you listening from right now? What time is it where you are? Drop a comment below and let me know. There's something special about knowing we're all scattered across the globe, yet connected by our curiosity about the past. If you're new here, consider subscribing. These stories are crafted to help you unwind, to transform history from something distant into something intimate and soothing. And if you've been here before, thank you for returning. Tonight, we're exploring a holiday you think you know. But beneath the candy and costumes lies something far older, far darker, and infinitely more fascinating. So settle in, dim the lights, get comfortable. Let's journey back to a time when Halloween wasn't about trick-or-treating. It was about survival. Hook, 30 seconds to 1 minute. Imagine standing in the cold darkness of an ancient Celtic night, watching your neighbors build enormous bonfires. They're not celebrating. They're terrified. Because tonight, they believe the barrier between the living and the dead has dissolved. And the dead are coming back. This is Halloween's true beginning. Not a children's party, but a desperate attempt to survive the return of the dead. To understand Halloween's dark origins, we need to travel back over 2,000 years to the windswept hills of ancient Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. This is the land of the Celts, a collection of tribes who lived in constant awareness of nature's rhythms and the thin boundary between the visible world and the realm of spirits. Picture their world. Vast forests where sunlight barely penetrates, standing stones marking sacred spaces, and communities huddled together against the approaching winter. The Celtic year was divided into two halves, the light half and the dark half. And at the turning point between these halves, on the night of October 31st, came their most important and most terrifying festival, Samhain, pronounced Samhain. This wasn't a celebration in the modern sense. It was a survival ritual. The Celts believed that on Samhain night, the boundary between our world and the other world, the realm of the dead, of spirits, of the owl sea or fairy folk, became dangerously thin. So thin that beings could cross over. And they did. Samhain marked the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter, which the Celts called the dark half of the year. Winter meant death. Crops stopped growing. Animals grew scarce. People died from cold and starvation. So this transition night was loaded with spiritual significance and genuine fear. The festival began at sunset on October 31st, because for the Celts, each new day began at dusk, not dawn. As darkness fell, communities would extinguish their hearth fires, the flames that had burned all summer, protecting their homes. Everything went dark and cold. Then came the bonfires. On hilltops across Celtic lands, druids, the priest class who wielded immense spiritual and political power, would light enormous sacred bonfires. These weren't simple campfires. They were massive blazes, carefully constructed from specific woods believed to have protective properties. Oak was particularly important, being sacred to the Celts, along with rowan and hazel. The purpose of these fires was twofold. First, they honored the sun, which was growing weaker as winter approached, and encouraged its return. Second, and more importantly, they created a protective barrier against the spirits walking abroad that night. Because the Celts weren't just worried about their beloved dead returning. They believed all manner of spirits could cross over. Some were harmful. Some were mischievous. Some were outright malevolent. Families would bring cattle between two bonfires, a practice called need fire, believing the smoke and flames would cleanse the animals and protect them through winter. People, too, would pass between the fires for purification and protection. But the most disturbing aspect of Samhain was the sacrifice. Historical accounts, primarily from Roman observers who later conquered Celtic lands, describe animal sacrifices, and possibly human sacrifices, performed during Samhain. Cattle, horses, and other livestock were killed and offered to the gods and spirits. Their bones were burned in the bonfire, which is why scholars believe the term bonfire may derive from bone fire. The Roman historian Strabo wrote about the Celts' wicker man, enormous human-shaped structures made of wicker and wood, filled with animals and possibly human prisoners, then set ablaze as an offering to the gods. While the historical accuracy of these accounts is debated, they speak to the fear and desperation the Celts felt as winter approached. After the communal bonfire rituals, families would carry embers from the sacred fire back to their homes to relight their hearth fires. This flame, blessed by Druid ritual, would protect the household through the dark months ahead. But simply hiding indoors wasn't enough. The spirits were already among them. This is where Halloween's costumes originated, and their purpose was far from playful. The Celts believed that on Samhain night, the spirits of the dead returned to walk among the living. But not all spirits were friendly. Some were angry, some sought revenge, some were simply lost and confused. And then there were the Ausi, supernatural beings similar to what we'd call fairies, but far more dangerous. To avoid being recognized by malevolent spirits, or worse, being possessed or taken away to the other world, people would disguise themselves. They wore costumes made from animal skins and heads, covering their faces with masks or blackening them with ash from the sacred fires. The goal was to look like a spirit themselves, to blend in, to become invisible to the dangerous forces walking abroad. Some accounts suggest people dressed as spirits to honor their dead ancestors, inviting them to join the family feast. But there was always an undercurrent of fear. You never knew which spirit might accept your invitation. Food played a crucial role in these protective rituals. Families would set extra places at their tables for deceased relatives, offering them food and drink. But they'd also leave food outside their doors, not as a gift, but as a bribe. Here's food. Take it and leave us alone. This is the true origin of trick-or-treating, though it wouldn't be called that for many centuries. The practice called mumming or guising developed from these Samhain traditions. People, especially young men and boys, would go door to door in costume, performing songs or tricks in exchange for food. But there was an implied threat in this exchange. Give us food, or the spirits we represent might cause trouble. In Ireland and Scotland, these geysers carried carved turnips with candles inside. Not pumpkins, which didn't exist in Europe. Turnips. Imagine carving a turnip with primitive tools in the flickering firelight, creating grotesque faces meant to scare away evil spirits. These lanterns were carried to light the way through the dangerous night and to warn spirits away. The faces carved into these turnips weren't cute or playful. They were horrifying, meant to represent malevolent spirits or to scare such spirits away through ugliness. When Irish immigrants brought these traditions to America in the 19th century, they discovered pumpkins were much easier to carve, and the jack-o'-lantern was born. But why jack-o'-lantern? The name comes from an Irish folktale about a man named Stingy Jack, a drunkard who tricked the devil, not once, but twice. When Jack died, he was too sinful for heaven, but had angered the devil so much that hell wouldn't take him either. He was doomed to wander the earth forever with only a burning coal inside a carved turnip to light his way. Jack of the Lantern, jack-o'-lantern. The Irish believed these strange lights seen floating over bogs and marshes at night, what we now know as marsh gas igniting, were Jack's spirits still wandering, and they represented lost souls trapped between worlds. Carving turnips to look like Jack became a way to ward off similarly doomed spirits. As Christianity spread through Celtic lands, beginning around the 5th century, the church faced a problem. They couldn't eliminate Samhain. It was too deeply rooted in the culture, too important to people's sense of connection with their dead and their survival through winter. So they did what the church often did with pagan festivals: they absorbed it. In the 8th century, Pope Gregory III designated November 1st as All Saints' Day, also called All Hallows' Day, a time to honor all Christian saints and martyrs. The night before became All Hallows' Eve, then Hallows' Eve, then Halloween. November 2nd became All Souls' Day, specifically for praying for the souls of the dead. The church had effectively created a 3-day Christian overlay on the Celtic festival of the dead. But the old beliefs didn't disappear. They went underground, blending with Christian practices in ways that would have horrified church authorities. People still lit bonfires, still wore costumes, still left food for spirits. They just did it under the veneer of Christian observance. In medieval Europe, Halloween night became associated with particularly dark superstitions. It was believed that witches were most powerful on this night, flying on broomsticks to gather at midnight Sabbaths. Black cats, associated with witches as their familiars or demonic companions, were particularly feared and persecuted. The medieval church taught that Halloween night was when the devil was most active, when demons could roam freely, when witchcraft was at its peak. Ironically, this made the holiday even more popular, as people needed even more protection rituals. Young women performed divination rituals on Halloween, attempting to see their future husbands. One involved peeling an apple in one long strip and throwing the peel over their shoulder. It would supposedly land in the shape of their future husband's initial. Another involved standing before a mirror at midnight, eating an apple and combing their hair. Their future husband's face would appear behind them in the glass. These fortune-telling games seem innocent enough, until you realize they were based on the belief that on Halloween, the future could be glimpsed because the normal boundaries of time, like the boundaries between life and death, had dissolved. Here's what makes Halloween's origins genuinely unsettling. It was never about fun. Every tradition, the costumes, the fires, the offerings of food, the carved faces, was born from authentic terror. The Celts weren't playing pretend. They truly believed that on this night, the dead walked among them, that spirits could possess them, that they might be taken to the other world and never return. That winter's approach meant death was coming, and the only way to survive was through ritual protection. Modern Halloween, with its candy and commercialism, has sanitized this terror into entertainment. We've taken a festival born from the fear of death and turned it into a celebration of death as spectacle. But here's the deeper revelation. The Celts were right in a way. Not about literal spirits walking the earth, but about acknowledging death. They understood that death is always with us, that winter always comes, that loss is inevitable. And rather than denying this reality, they faced it directly once a year, creating rituals to process their fear and grief. Samhain was their way of saying, we know death is coming. We know we'll lose people we love. We know the dark times ahead. So let's light fires together. Let's remember our dead. Let's support each other through the darkness. That's actually profound. When you understand Halloween's true origins, modern celebrations take on new meaning. Every jack-o'-lantern on a porch echoes those ancient carved turnips, meant to ward off evil spirits. Every child in a ghost costume unknowingly recreates the Celtic practice of disguising themselves from the dead. Every piece of candy handed to trick-or-treaters fulfills the ancient obligation to provide offerings so spirits will leave you in peace. Even Halloween parties, with their focus on horror and death imagery, reflect the original festival's purpose. Confronting mortality, making death less frightening by making it familiar, by playing with it, by controlling it through ritual. The commercialization of Halloween has transformed it into America's second most profitable holiday, generating over $10 billion in spending annually. We've turned ancient terror into an industry. But beneath the commercial excess, the original impulse remains. We still gather together on this night. We still light up the darkness, now with electricity instead of bonfires, but the impulse is the same. We still share food. We still wear disguises. We still tell scary stories. And on some level, we're still acknowledging what the Celts knew. That death exists, that darkness comes, and that we need rituals to help us face these truths together. Modern Halloween has also become a night when social boundaries dissolve. Children approach strangers' homes, a practice normally discouraged. People wear costumes that let them embody different identities. The normal rules are suspended, if only for a few hours. This echoes Samhain's original nature as a liminal time. A threshold moment when normal boundaries didn't apply, when anything was possible, when the world was turned upside down. Some neo-pagan groups have reclaimed Samhain as a spiritual practice, observing it as the Celts did, honoring ancestors and acknowledging the cycle of death and rebirth in nature. They light bonfires, perform rituals, and maintain that direct relationship with mortality that Christianity tried to suppress. For them, and perhaps for all of us if we look closely enough, Halloween isn't about candy or costumes. It's about remembering that we live in a world where death is real, where darkness falls, where winter comes. And it's about deciding, despite all that, to light a fire anyway. So the next time you carve a pumpkin or hand candy to a child in a ghost costume, remember, You're participating in a ritual that stretches back over 2,000 years. You're echoing the practices of people who lived in constant awareness of death's presence and who created elaborate ceremonies to survive their fear. Halloween's dark origins reveal something essential about human nature. We need rituals to face our fears. We need communities to survive the darkness. And we need to acknowledge death in order to fully embrace life. The Celts understood this. And in our modern, sanitized way, perhaps we still do. Thank you for joining me on this journey tonight, travelers of time. I hope this story has given you a new appreciation for the holiday we think we know so well. If you enjoyed this exploration into Halloween's true origins, consider leaving a like and subscribing for more history that's perfect for bedtime. And let me know in the comments. How does understanding Halloween's dark past change how you'll celebrate it? Until next time, sleep well. And remember, sometimes the most terrifying stories are the ones that are true.